Welcome to A Knight's Respite, the podcast where Sir Lao-Tzu and St. Godric take a break from their duties as knights to share their passion for LARPing and Renaissance festivals. Join us as we explore the world of medieval reenactment, discuss the latest trends in LARPing, and share tips and tricks for making the most of your Renaissance festival experience. Whether you're a seasoned knight or a curious onlooker, A Knight's Respite is the perfect place to discover the magic of medieval times. So grab your sword and shield and let's embark on this journey together. This is A Knight's Respite. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of A Knight's Respite. I am so glad that you're here for episode 3. My name is St. Godric. That is Sir Lao-Tzu. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Enjoying the weather out here in Tucson. I think it was maybe about 70 degrees out today. Did a little bit of climbing, so it's been pretty nice.
70 degrees. It was, I think, 14 when I got up this morning.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I miss the snow a little bit, but still being able to go out in like t-shirt and shorts makes me not miss it that much, but we'll see in the summers.
Yeah, but you were just telling me though that you trade having to have air. What was that in your room that you said you have to have in every room now? Like the air.
Like if I don't go to sleep with a humidifier on, like I just wake up super chapped lips. I feel like that episode of SpongeBob where he's like begging for water. Like lessons learned. There's going to be a humidifier in almost every room.
Yep. So there are advantages, disadvantages. I guess question here, because it's wintertime, but just before we jump into stuff, are you still doing like a local weekly LARP gathering?
So I'm a little bit on a break. Whenever I first moved out here, I was going pretty much every week. But lately, I don't know, like before moving, I was really noticing I was in a burnout phase. And the people out here are actually a lot of fun. They're really great. They're super nice people. There's experienced players and non-experienced players, which is super nice to have that mix. But driving in on Sunday, I'll just realize like, man, I'm a little bit in a burnout. So thinking, I don't know, a month or two off. And that's probably actually going to end next week because I'm driving to Texas for Smiley's knighting, for his multi-belt knighting, which I'm pretty excited about. Be able to see some good friends, be able to see Mort, and it'll be a good time. I think that will be the good kind of segue into, after having a little bit of a rest, a little bit of R&R and focus in on myself some, be able to transition back into like, all right, this is the game that I like so much.
Yeah, for sure. Reason I asked for that is because I was interested to see if there was a cultural difference in like the weekly gatherings. Because I know a lot of the stuff in the Northeast kind of goes to once a month during the wintertime, or maybe cancels completely during the wintertime, depending on what game you play. I wondered, but your local group does still meet at least once every week and
it's basically springtime out
That's
here.
Awesome.
So it's super easy to meet. I know there are some tough people because they do the same in the summer as well. When it's, I don't know, somewhere around 200-300 degrees outside in the desert, they're still meeting up. So they're pretty impressive.
That's pretty cool. So for today's topic, we have a fun one that Lao-Tzu and I agree on in some aspects, but disagree on in others. We're going to be discussing fighting companies, sometimes called households, sometimes called units, sometimes called guilds. Kind of just depends on the game that you're in, what they're going to call them. But Lao-Tzu, will you give us a rundown? What is a fighting company? Just kind of run through the basics.
That's a great question. And just kind of what you're saying, it definitely fluctuates between each game and each area of the country, and that's kind of natural. But the general gist of it is a group of people that work together, fight together in these different battle games and these different scenarios and different fights on various different LARPing and cross gaming aspects. But they go into it as a team with a unified front, often with wearing the same colors, camping in the same place, kind of creating a little bit of brother and sisterhood with each other, and kind of making their own little family in the game. But primarily the idea is that they're working in a unified front in these battle games to whether like to accomplish certain goals, to win, whether it's competitive or just general kind of battle gaming.
Yeah, and some of these groups have a theme to them.
Hmm.
So you might find one that is, a crusader theme, or you might find one that's a
Hmm.
musketeer theme, or you might find one if you're playing a fantasy game that is all orcs or all elves or things like that. But then you get other groups that have nothing to do with any theme, and it's just these are me and my boys, and we want to make sure that we camp
Yep.
and hang out and fight
Hmm.
together too. Some groups are very role play heavy, where like everybody's persona has to fit into this very particular thing. Other groups have almost no connection other than these are my
Yeah.
boys and we
Hmm.
want to hang out. And so, based on the group, and even within the same game, you can find groups that are very varied
Yeah,
and
and
different.
that definitely leads into one of the bigger advantages of like fighting companies as a whole is you can really find your collective group, your tribe in the game.
Mm,
Whether the kind of what you were mentioning is like if you're very much into role playing, you might find that role playing company or household or whatever name, just kind of what we're
mhm.
collectively describing this. You can really find people that have mutual interests and want to accomplish that with each other. That is, in my eyes, one of the biggest advantages of like getting into a
Mhm.
fighting company because you really work together and kind of support each other with that mutual goal in mind.
Yeah, 100%. The if everybody has the same goal, it's going to make going to the events that
Yeah.
much more fun. And so some fighting
Yeah.
companies' goals are we want to win every single thing that we show up towards. Some other fighting companies' goals can be like more specifically goal oriented, like this
Yep.
specific event or this style of event. We're going to rock it because
Hmm.
that's our favorite. Other groups get together and they go, hey, what we enjoy and what we're good at is running the event. And so we're going to, we show up and we always run gate. We're the ones that are the go-to for that. And the group can kind of that can be the
Hmm.
rallying cry around it. Other groups might not even have any of that and they just like to camp
Yeah.
and drink together, right? And that's a perfectly acceptable and fine reason to form yourself into these companies
Oh yeah,
too.
big time. And I do think it generally does have a very good impact on these games as a whole.
Mm,
What you really find whenever it comes to fighting companies in general is it creates a level of organization that you wouldn't really have otherwise.
mm,
That people can approach these battle games as a team and kind of figure out like this is how we want to work together and how we want to accomplish certain goals, and that gives a I don't know, maybe a little bit fidelity for the game designers to realize that okay, people are going to be organized whenever
mm-hmm.
they're looking at these games, and there's going to be groups kind of working towards a collective whole, which is really neat. I think that is something that's fantastic for the game because in general, organized play is going to be more dynamic and be a lot more fun and fast paced.
Mm-hmm. And it gives me something to look forward to, right? When I show up at this,
Mm-hmm.
I go to an event, I drive 3 hours, I'm there for the weekend, and I've got my 25 other people that I only see
Yeah.
3 or 4 times a year. And it's a hype thing. It's like we only get to
Mm-hmm.
fight with each other so often. And it's just something that we can look forward to. I'd say another advantage to fighting companies, like what we kind of alluded to earlier, different fighting companies, different units will have similar, like everyone wears the same colors or the same
Mm-hmm.
symbols. And so like blue, green and
Yeah.
blue and silver are my fighting company's symbols. I know for me as a crafter, it was great to have how about this? I have a lot of ideas, and being able to have an excuse to
Yeah.
make something is good sometimes. And so it's like, oh, I've got a new tunic I want to make. What do I need? Ooh, I can make it in my fighting company. Like it gives me that creative excuse to kind of make some cool stuff,
Oh
if
yeah, for
that makes
sure. And I
sense.
think it's generally kind of a pretty neat look in the game whenever you can look onto a field and see,
Mm,
oh, there's a big group of red right there, and there's a big group of these people there, and
mm-hmm,
fighting company A and fighting company B. It's kind of neat to be able to look at the field and kind of see that group identity and really kind of
mm-hmm,
understand how different groups thrive. Like some groups, different companies might be very good at like having an armor wall. Like they don't play a lot of spellcasters in our game, for example, but they are really good at having a big kind of a meat shield in front of everything, while other
mm,
groups might be kind of the opposite. It's like, all right, they have a lot of really good casters and a lot of really good support. They want to hook up with that group that is more, I don't know,
mm-hmm.
melee and physically focused, and you can see that on the field. You can see how like these different groups are going to be working in tandem with each
Yeah.
other.
That's one of the cool parts about going to the big events where you have to team up with other groups, is trying to figure out like because you might not always want to go to the powerhouse group, because the powerhouse groups tend to get what we call blue shelled. Like if your team is the best team, the game runners kind of stack stuff against you sometimes to make it more fair and fun for everybody. And so if you're looking at, hey, my group strengths are A, B, and C, your group strengths are D, E, and F, let's join together, because that like meta game aspect of what we're good at, what you're good at, is pretty fun for me.
And allows for a lot of planning. What was it? The first fighting company I was in was Temple of the Vanguard, and they much smaller company than at least at the time than a lot of others, but they spent so much time in planning before the board or before battle games and figuring out like, all right, we can provide this sort of like casting group or this sort of strategy or this sort of distraction in these different areas. I mean, that's, I don't know, the sort of neat thing that it lends yourself to whenever you're trying to evaluate your own group's kind of strengths and weaknesses. And you can really like sit down and have a playbook before you even like step foot on the field, which is always super cool. Like, I don't know, whenever you have kind of a plan within the actual battle game itself, it can be a lot of fun whenever you like as a team like come together and like execute. I don't know, that was always one of my favorite things about being in a company is like, all right, we have a discrete objective we want to accomplish, and coming up with your own communication styles and things like that to accomplish it is always a blast.
And in these games, a lot of times, like the big strategy doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's like we can have a great strategy, but someone who's just really, really good at fighting is going to win 8 times out of 10 anyway. So the moments that strategy actually does matter is really cool, because it's like, hey, we should have lost here. This is this last Bridge Wars that we just did. My team, it was essentially a best out of 3. My team lost the first match, and we had to drastically change our strategy, and then we're able to come back and do the reverse sweep and win. And so like being able to see the successes that come from the planning don't happen that often, but when they do, it's pretty cool. Sure.
But at the same time, there are some drawbacks when it comes to companies as well. One that I don't know, immediately kind of comes to mind, and this is, I don't know, maybe not as big of a deal, but as someone who like I've been in my fair share of companies, is kind of what you're mentioning as a pro earlier is, oh, all your garb is kind of centered around certain colors and certain symbols and things like that. One of the downsides, if you do leave a company, and most are pretty cool. Like, I mean, I'm wearing colors from the Scions whenever I was a part of the Scions, and there's no issues with that. But there can be a little bit of pressure of not wanting to wear like the symbols and things like that from like previous fighting companies.
Well, and it depends. It depends on the group, because like if you were in our company and you left, we would be very upset if you wore our colors and our symbol after you left, especially if it was like an ugly leaving. Like we have some people that we allow to, like, friends of the company that can still wear it, but on a general rule of thumb for us is when you leave, you don't get to wear our colors anymore.
That's definitely like one of the more negative sides of things. Like you definitely invest a lot into like garb and things like that, whether the company helped you supply those things or whether they didn't, can definitely lead to a little bit of a sunken cost. It kind of feels like, which has led me like, right now I'm not in a fighting company, but even whenever I was in one, like just having some personal colors as well, like your own personal garb, so that you don't have everything sunk into kind of one single kind of identity, which is good to have a little bit of individuality, if you ask me. And I'm always going to be on that sort of like that side of things. I've always gravitated towards like socializing in the group as a whole, not just a smaller subsection of it, but really focusing in a very wide way. The company is always super great and super fun, especially whenever we're planning and doing things, but having kind of that more broad sense of self definitely lended me a little bit more to wanting to kind of wear my own personal colors and own symbols after a while, just because, I don't know, just my style at that point.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. Because one of the negatives for me, there is a cool aspect of walking out on the field and you and 20 people are all in the same uniform, right? Like that's cool. There's like something to that. but man, I love my drip and I love having the coolest stuff on the field, and so it can be kind of what you're talking about here. How do you, especially if you're in a large group, like there are some fighting companies that are national, right? You'll go to every kingdom, everywhere there are chapters of this group. How do you, it can be hard sometimes to differentiate yourself from one of the 100 or one of the 300 that happen to be there. So that can be difficult. And then I think another, probably the largest drawback for me personally in fighting companies and units and these type of things is if we're not careful, we can become very clannish. We can wall ourselves off because most fighting companies will camp together, which is an advantage in my opinion. I love throwing resources together. We'll pull our resources and do food. We'll pull our resources and do firewood. It's just, I really enjoy camping with my friends, but if we're not careful, we can limit ourselves and make it to where other people, we're not welcoming to other people, or we don't branch out and do some of the other things and interact with some of the other people in the game because we're only hanging out with our clan, our 10 people. And that's not good.
That's a big one. Especially whenever you kind of think like there's some kingdoms that aren't as fighting company focused. They still have them, but less focused in it compared to kind of the Rising Winds, for example, where it's got a heavier focus on fighting companies, but there's a lot of parks that camp with each other. And I think that's a fantastic part of the game because, same.
I love that.
Like you're able to bring people who haven't been part of like the kingdom level very much. It's like, hey, this is a place where you can have a home. Like you always know there's going to be people there that know you, and you kind of know that you're camping with a group. It facilitates a similar feeling as a fighting company itself, but it's a little bit more, we'll say, facilitating for newer people and great for building that like home life community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last kind of negative for me, like the drawback, the disadvantage is there are very few things in Amtgard in particular, but I've seen it in other games, but in Amtgard in particular, that will like blow up and ruin friendships and drive someone out of the game than leaving a fighting company. Because so often these things can become so tribal, so clannish, where it's like, man, if I'm leaving this group because it doesn't fit me where I'm at in my Amtgard career, in my personal journey, all of these things, it's like an affront to the friends that I made in that area sometimes. And it can cause these massive rifts if you're not careful with it.
And I think that kind of leads into a little bit of the idea of like, when is it appropriate, and like who should you be forming these companies with, and like what sort of mentality you should be going into it? Because I know some of that, we'll say, I mean, that's a little bit on the emotional maturity side of things, about like what happens whenever you join a group and leave a group. And that can really be steered and directed a ton by the very beginning. Like when you join a group, where are you at and kind of your journey in the game whenever you start, and what kind of attracts you to certain groups, like what they do. And I have, go ahead.
So real quick, how many fighting companies have you been a part of? And then what attracted you to those fighting companies? And then if you don't mind, what caused you to want to move on down the road to the next one? And I'll do the same thing after you.
I've been directly in 2 fighting companies and then adjacent in 2 more. Essentially being with that fighting company, hanging out with them, but just not officially joining the roster. So we'll say pseudo 4. For the first fighting company I joined, I was a little bit new to the game. And this is, I don't know, I would say it's definitely a lesson learned. I don't regret being a part of the fighting company at all. But I didn't really know too much about the game and how like social scene is structured, for example. And what really attracted me to the group initially is how, like, I don't know, organized they were and ready to kind of teach some newer people, and that's what I was a very new person. Now willing.
And this was Vanguard.
Yeah, I tried to be careful because there's out here there's Vanguard. And I actually talked to some of the people in Vanguard that they saw on my org profile. I was like, oh, he was in Temple. We know those guys. So I was in Temple of the Vanguard, and they kind of plucked me up really fresh and taught me a lot about class gaming. 'Cause that's what they were really focused in on, was class gaming. But at the same time, at that point, I don't think I was mature enough in the game to really make a decision on which group I wanted to be part of, or if I wanted to be a part of a group at all. And that's definitely a little bit of the moral of the story for me, is kind of jumping a little bit, because I left Temple of the Vanguard for the Scions after that, the Rising Wind Scions. And it was an immediate transition, so I didn't have any downtime there. So I didn't have really the time to kind of mature as a player and figure out what it's like to not be in a company. And what attracted me to that group was just a lot of my friends. And we were forming the group here in the Rising Winds, essentially starting the chapter of the Rising Wind Scions. And it's great to sit and play with your friends and things like that. And I think this leads a little bit into one of your disadvantages, is like whenever you're trying to leave, it was really hard for me to leave the Scions whenever I did, because it's all my closest friends in the game. But the plus side of that is all my closest friends in the game. So whenever I left, it's like, oh yeah, we're still absolutely friends. And that definitely comes down to the emotional maturity and kind of speaking with your friends and saying, it's like, hey, I just want something different. This group has its identity. I have a different one, and kind of want to move on, if that makes sense. And since then, I haven't really been in a fighting company, and I love it. I don't know. I really like kind of being the free agent. And there might be a little privilege there in that I just know a lot of people and am completely fine with just finding groups like, hey, I'm fighting with you this event. I'm gonna, like, my skill set. I know y'all skill set. I think we both have something to bring to each other, and I'm going to be with you guys. And in my mind, that's almost the ideal setting, but I can understand that's kind of hard, especially on like both ends of the coin is or both sides of the coin, because you don't know everyone that wants to just kind of field with you at that event. You don't know their skill set and their discipline and willingness to kind of work as a team and study beforehand, if that's what you do. And on the flip side, like if you're a new person, you don't know the group and how they structure very much. So yeah, I do realize there's a little privilege there, but it is nice whenever it works out.
Well, and I remember being a new player, and I felt this giant need to join a fighting company, because the first couple events that I went to, all of my friends who I met at Park, right, love these guys, got along great with them. We show up to the Kingdom events and we're camping, and they all split and go camp with their fighting companies. And as someone who was new, who wasn't in a fighting company, I was like, I remember a couple of events like dreading going, because I knew I was going to be camping by myself, or I was going to be camping with randos, because all of the people I knew were split off into 3 or 4 other groups. And so I remember very early on joining the War Dancers, because my knight was a War Dancer, which was cool because I got to camp with him, but I would have camped with him anyway. I think it wouldn't have been a big deal, but there weren't very many War Dancers. There were like 3 of us in our kingdom. And so, and I was the only one really who was fielding at that point. And so that one didn't last very long, just because there wasn't a large group of us, and that didn't fulfill what I wanted out of a fighting company at that point. So I left there and went and joined the Saracens. And joined the Saracens. If you're not super familiar, they're a national company. So they are international company. So like the company I'm in currently is pretty much just in 1 or 2 kingdoms. The Saracens are in every kingdom, right? They're everywhere, which is really cool, because if you move, like what Lao Tzu and I, both our careers are ones that are going to be moving us around periodically. Being able to have a national company really appealed to me, because I knew I would have friends everywhere that I went, essentially. And I was there for like, I don't know, maybe a year. but it became pretty quick, very apparent pretty quickly to me that the goals that I had as a player did not line up with the goals of the fighting company. Like I was pushing hard for my masterhood at that point. I wanted to be fielding. I wanted to be entering tournaments. I wanted to learn. I wanted to kind of surround myself with the people who had the same drive and desire that I did. And that fighting company, at least in my area, was great people, still friends with a lot of them, but their goal was more of the hang out, drink and party and just the social aspect of it. And then we'll field and play amp guard sometimes, which just wasn't what I needed at that point. So I left and then joined FC. And my mindset, what kind of drew me to them was at the time, there were like 5 Serpent Knights in the kingdom that I was in, and 4 of them were in that company. And so if I wanted to learn, which, you know, and I did, and I wanted to surround myself with the people that I wanted to learn from. And so I ended up joining FC, have been in FC ever since. But I think that the point I want to make out of that from my story and from Lao Tzu's story, we both joined companies very early. And I think we both would say that that's not ideal, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
How come?
Like, if I could go back to the beginning of the game for me, like, I would definitely say is like, personally, and I don't necessarily suggest this for everybody, is like, but don't join a fighting company at least for the first 2 keynote events that you go to, if not more.
100%
you just can meet. You can still meet and have friends and hang out with the exact same people. But whenever you take that time to kind of establish yourself on the kind of kingdom scene, and that's less saying this is my skills or whatever, nothing like that, but just actually being there, being present, meeting people, making friends, kind of doing a vibe check. It's like you figure out which groups you gravitate towards more, and you're not gonna be able to get that just kind of out of one event. And you're not going to feel that in the honeymoon phase either. Like, you really want to spend some time with these different groups and see like how they work within your kingdom and work or in multiple kingdoms, if that's what you're interested in. And field with them multiple times. If nightlife is your thing, like spend the nightlife with them and others, because you may hit it off decently well in one group, like Saturday night, but 2 companies down may be the perfect fit, but you would never know because you just immediately hopped in on one. And you see that a lot just because, you were saying it exactly. Like you just feel often pressured to join a fighting companies in certain kingdoms.
That's it. Especially in the kingdoms where fighting companies are king. They're like the kingdom I grew up in, kingdom Lao Tzu grew up in, Rising Winds, the fighting companies are king. Like, you camp with your fighting company. If you're not with the fighting company, it's kind of odd. And like the parks don't really camp together, but sometimes, but most of the time people are camping with their fighting companies. Where I'm at in Winter's Edge, it's almost the complete opposite. There's like 3 companies maybe, and most people aren't in a company. They camp with their parks and their local groups. And it's cool. And I like aspects of both. But it's depending on what kingdom you're a part of, that's going to change a little bit based on the culture that's going to be there.
Big time. So I will always advocate for that little caution, because it's only going to serve you more. You're never you're not going to miss out much by not immediately joining a company. But what you gain in that patience is a lot of wisdom and figuring out which people you really vibe with, both on events and off events, because you're still communicating online and things like that, and how you feel about people offline matters a lot. Because if you're, especially in the company that likes to plan and whatnot, if you see that evidence off the field, like that's something that you might gravitate a little bit more. Or if you see that it's not organized, that might be something you don't like, and kind of vice versa. So taking the time really can help yourself in the game whenever you're trying to like figure out and establish yourself as in a company or not. Like, there's nothing wrong with not being in company. I'm loving it right now. It'll probably be a minute before I join a company, just because it's nice to kind of have the freedom. It's like, oh, I want to camp with this group and this group of friends and at this event, or a different group at a different event, and not feeling any pressure one way or another. And I get it.
Well, I would say you have the advantage. You have the advantage though of being you're good. And so it's easy for you to float in between groups, and you bring, right, you're a paragon, you're good at the game. If you're a new player, that can be kind of difficult, right? Because you're not as good. Theoretically, you don't know the game as well. You're kind of floating. And so what advice would you have for someone who's like, hey, this is my second Kingdom event. I'm a level 4 scout. Do I join a company? Do I not? What are like, what piece of advice do you have, like, most important for them? And then I'll give mine.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great point, Godric, because you can't just say, oh, I am you know who I am and I can give you the skill set. But what you can do is approach these different groups and say, hey, I want to be a team player. It's like, I know that you don't know my skill set, but I really want to like work well with the team and work well with like your strategy. And I want to kind of succeed in that regard. It's like, you don't know if I'm a great archer or a great caster or something like that, but like, help me make spell lists that can facilitate the group goal. If you're really showing that willingness to like work with the group, it can go a long way, because most fighting companies have holes where they need someone to fill, whether that's a candy druid or an archer or someone in armor. They may have extra armor laying around, or they want to gummy a monk. I mean, you can say all sorts of different things. So just willing to like walk up and say, hey, I'm pretty new and would love to like work with you guys and learn and trying to help your strategy where I can go a long way. And I think it would be very fresh for someone to hear that. Instead of bringing kind of their own ego to it, they're bringing like an eagerness to kind of be a good puzzle piece and fit in where the group needs.
Yep, 100%. That's kind of my play style. Like, I guess my role within my fighting company, I am not the peak, like top tier of any particular class or play style. But I am above average at most of them, and am able to fill where we need it.
The above average.
No, it's not. But like, if we need a healer, I can fill healer and do well. Not great, but well, right? Same thing if I need to put on armor, I can. If I need to, fill in the roles, there is going to be useful for almost any group. So my piece of advice that I would give you, if you're looking for a fighting company, I would pull up a pen and paper and write down your top 3 goals for the next year to 3 years in the game that you're playing. For me, at one point in my career, it was, I want masterhood. I want to win battle games because I'm competitive. I want to be around people that actually fight and are good. And then, pick a third, whatever it is. Pick your goals, and then kind of compare those goals with what you see from the other companies, because they're going to, if one of your main goals is, I want a good group of community that I'm going to be able to communicate with Monday through Friday when we're not LARPing, because that's important for me. That is a completely good and valid goal. And there are going to be groups that do that better than others. Just like there are going to be groups that are, man, I really want to become the best archer in the game. Well, there might be a company over here that's got 10 of the top 10 archers in your kingdom. There's a pretty obvious choice where you need to go there. So I take your goals, figure out what you want, and then kind of compare them to what the other companies in the area are doing, and see which one's best
what
aligned.
You want and what you like to do. Because some people can be super into nightlife, some people cannot, some people may be super into bardic. So like including also a little bit of your just general enjoyment in the game can go a long way as far as finding a group that just, I don't know, vibes in the same way, even if it's different than kind of what their mission statement is. Just being able to hang out and enjoy the similar atmosphere can go a long way for your longevity in the game and just general happiness.
Yep, 100%. So that is going to wrap up episode 3 of A Night's Respite. I am St. Godric. That is... We'll do one of these. That is Sir Lao Tzu. Thank you so much for watching it up to the end. If you enjoyed this content, hit that like button for us. It does help the channel out a lot. We are officially now on all of the podcast casters as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube and would prefer an audio version or vice versa, these are up Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So with that done, we will see you next time.
See you, friends.
Have fun.